your Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative presents Hometown Heroes.
On February 8th, about 4:42 in the morning, we received a call.
1404, floor structure fire.
I woke up with smoke in my apartment.
When we arrived on the scene, we had heavy fire through the roof.
And at that point, I really thought this was going to be a bad day.
Many people had to be helped, and they were carried out on chairs and benches. Those firemen were tremendous.
It just was going too bad, too fast, that I decided to pull everybody out of the building.
It was a pretty intense moment.
I think there's a couple people that did some extraordinary things. Chief Covey got a bunch of people out of a building before the roof collapsed on him. He got hurt in that process.
The firemen saved 85 lives.
It just was a horrendous experience to go through, but the firemen were great. I'd call them all heroes.
This Hometown Hero has been brought to you by Novec.
Determination, skill, courage, training, triumph, Special Olympics. Mental handicaps do not discriminate. They transcend race, religion, economics, and culture. The World Health Organization estimates that there are more than 150 million people throughout the world with mental handicaps. And although a small percentage of them have severe limitations, in a room full of people, most would appear to be no different from anyone else. Having a mental handicap does not mean a person cannot function and is not related to their athletic ability. Everyone can learn and accomplish and succeed. A fact Special Olympics has been proving with great success for more than 25 years.
When the person is taken off their medications, they say that the nurse becomes the medication. So it's when they're having difficulty coping, it's actually the nurse that's going to help them through that process. I'm a mental health nurse here at NIH, and working here in mental health is special to me because we have a very special and significant relationship with the patients here that's different than any other mental health setting probably in the world.
But what if they kick me out of the program?
No, they're not going to kick you out, Suzanne.
But Larry, what if I can't make it without medication?
You're going to be able to make it, Suzanne. Sometimes we even have to put someone into an isolation room, a room without any furniture in it, just kind of bare for their own protection to cut down on the stimulus. I realize that this is just a period, this is a rough period that I need to help this person get through. That eventually we're going to intervene medically or in another way to, to bring them out of this, but for now, I have to get them through this time.
If you want to know what most of America will look like in the year 2020, it will look like this.
KFWB News Time, 2:43. The jury deliberating.
California is a nation-state of 35 million people. It is America's testing ground for the governing ideas of tomorrow. In the 1970s, tax cuts were a California issue. In the 1980s, tax limitation became a national policy. Again in the 80s, welfare reform was a California issue. In the 1990s, welfare reform became a reality. Today, California is the testing ground for the governing ideas of the 21st century. At the start of a new century, a new movement is arising from old principles. a movement of people who have seen the power of free markets, people who have benefited from individual liberty, people who want to reinvigorate a civil society, people who believe in progress.
Each generation defines itself. That opportunity is before us today. The traditions we choose to embrace, the values we hold dear, the principles for which we are willing to fight, these will define us. While the legacy of modern-day Virginians is yet to be determined, the influence of our forefathers continues to be felt. It was not by happenstance that the students in Tiananmen Square quoted from our Declaration of Independence.
To the extent that we continue to embrace the vision of Washington, of Jefferson, Madison, Henry, and Mason, we retain our unique place in history as the Commonwealth. To the extent that we abandon our heritage, we become indistinguishably commonplace.
Virginia is the noblest of our states. The great men came from Virginia. I heard it referenced once that George Washington was a sword, Patrick Henry was the voice, and Thomas Jefferson was the pen. I think that the ideas of these great men should be resurrected, and Virginia is the place for it to be done.
This is where the Institute comes into play, because you need to have a cool, intellectually driven organization high up looking down on the field of battle to call the plays without regard to politics.
To support the work of the Virginia Institute is to invest in the ideas of the Founding Fathers. It is to accept responsibility as the present generation for preserving the legacy of freedom for our children and for our children's children.
There was a time when Virginia's chief export to the rest of the country, and for that matter the rest of the world, was not tobacco or coal, but ideas. Ideas on liberty. By our example, we need to shoulder that mantle of responsibility and leadership once again. And perhaps by doing so, we will grasp the prophetic significance of John Adams' last words. Thomas Jefferson still survives.
Movement is to advance our great race.
Don't give up your freedom of speech. Power to the people is in our reach.
I say to you this afternoon that I would rather die on the highways of Alabama than make a butchery of my conscience.
Refusing to answer this question, then I'm going to ask you the question. Are you a member of the Screenwriters Guild?
More than 1,000 years ago, the Cahokia settlement near St. Louis, Missouri, was developing into a thriving city with pyramids more than 10 stories high. At the time, it was actually larger than London, England. In what is now called the Ohio Valley, the Hopewell people developed earthworks which reflect an understanding of geometry and astronomy among the most sophisticated of any culture on Earth at that time. These and thousands of other Native American triumphs no longer exist. But today, there is a spirit of rebirth and respect for these extraordinary Native American accomplishments and the cultures that created them. There is a hope that by understanding the rich history of Native peoples, we can begin to discover ourselves.
Friends, Native peoples have coexisted for more than 500 years with others who came to this land, but until now, there have been few opportunities for mutual understanding and respect. Now, in an extraordinary new beginning, the Smithsonian Institution plans to build a living tribute to the Native peoples of this hemisphere, the National Museum of the American Indian. This new museum, honoring the first inhabitants of the land, will be built on the last available site on the Washington Mall in our nation's capital. Symbolizing a spirit of respect for Native American cultures, the museum will exhibit one of the world's greatest collections of indigenous artifacts and will change the way we see Native Americans by celebrating contemporary Indian culture as well. Please join me in supporting this extraordinary museum. Call 1-800-242-NMAI, National Museum of American Indian.
It's no secret that alcohol and drug abuse continue to plague our society. What is a secret, though, is the magnitude of the problem among people with disabilities. If you think you have a substance abuse problem, call today.
She doesn't want to go out anymore, and she's gotten so cranky.
She can't seem to concentrate.
Wonder she's always tired. She doesn't sleep well, and she's never hungry.
She says her life seems pointless and that we'd all be better off without her.
Depression is a real illness that affects more than 12 million women each year. If you think you know someone who may have clinical depression, help them get treated. For more information, contact the National Mental Health Association at 800-969-6642.
Bricks create the foundation for most of Mount Vernon's buildings, as well as for garden walls, the ha-ha walls built to keep farm animals off the front lawn, the stables, and even Washington's original tomb. In 18th century Virginia, when a building was being constructed, the bricks were usually made right at the site for ease of transportation. Initially, Washington hired white brickmakers and bricklayers, many of whom were indentured servants. Over the years, these servants taught Washington's slaves how to make the brick, and by late in the 18th century, nearly all the brickmaking was done and managed by slaves. Even when he was away at war or serving as our first president, Washington paid close attention to the brickmaking at Mount Vernon.
Over the next few minutes, you'll witness the remarkable events that occur in just a single 24-hour period at Children's National Medical Center. Events that truly are miracles in progress.
One trauma stat, ETA 3 minutes by helicopter emergency room.
The Trauma Center at Children's is a national model for pediatric emergency care. At least a couple of times a day, the normally hectic pace here is jolted into high gear.
Can you tell me your name? Can you talk to me?
His name is Darvell Jacobs, and at this moment, not even medical experts are certain whether this little boy will live or die.
5 cc.
He's not really responding to pain anymore.
The emergency team is under the gun.
He's critical.
Their job, Stabilize the patient.
Closed head injury. Which means that there's potentially some trauma to the brain.
It's time to make split-second decisions about what's wrong, what needs to be done, and when.
1 milligram. 88 for heart rate.
I want some
blood pressure's not up yet.
A lift for him.
As soon as he can be stabilized, Darvell is rushed to radiology.
What do you see?
There's a fracture right here.
A sophisticated CAT scan helps doctors confirm their suspicions.
Music is well said to be the speech of angels. In fact, nothing among the utterances allowed to man is felt to be so divine. It brings us near to the infinite. Who in words can express the effect music has on us? A kind of inarticulate, unfathomable speech which leads us to the edge of the infinite and lets us for moments gaze into that. Chamber music is intimate, it is infinite, and it is passionate.
Somewhere deep inside man lies the fascination to journey beyond what is known, to have a sense of location, a relationship of the here to there. It is a desire that can only be fulfilled through trial and error, expedition and experience, often beyond logic and at great peril. Perhaps this is why human discovery echoes down through the ages, and the lure of places beyond the known world have become such an enticement. And so, map-making is inevitable.
Map-making is probably a fundamental human experience. So you think back as to how early maps were done. The earliest maps are actually found on Babylonian tablets, clay tablets. And interestingly, they map property lines, they map cities, you have city maps, and you even have around 6000 BC a world map done on a Babylonian tablet.
The idea that symbols drawn on parchment could represent places and peoples was a revolutionary theory.
Mapping is spatial perception, the arrangement of things within space. Where is something in terms of where we are? How far do we have to go to reach it? What is the relationship? Is it above us, below us, or over the horizon? So mapping is a very spatially oriented perspective of the human mind, and it seems to have been with the human being ever since our earliest beginnings.
By the mid-15th century, the legacy of the Roman Empire that had governed the entire civilized world slowly but surely was beginning to lose its grip. For centuries, the Latin West and the Byzantine Empire in the East had lived in balance with one another, all the while trying to check the ebb and flow of the Moorish expansion.
This expansion, which is, one may think, inevitable, has this terrible toll. And yet all of history, that's what history is. I mean, everywhere you look, I mean, the Greeks expanded, the Romans expanded, and there's always destruction and benefits. So, I mean, one can't stop this process in history, which leads to both goods and evils.
1453, the fall of Constantinople. The 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire was finally crushed when the Turks captured Constantinople dramatically, forever altering trade in the Mediterranean.
We have to make the average citizen care, we have to make the average politician care, the average everyone care. And my job, to a large degree, is to inspire care, to inspire hope that there's still time to save wildlife.
If you save animals, you're actually saving mankind. That's my belief, because it's a part of your life.
I guess if it all boiled down to it, the only way they can really get me out of the zoo world is in a pine box, because I really love it, and the people that work here really love it.
There really isn't another organization like the New York Zoological Society, and I can't think of an organization that you would pick that could do more in conservation and education than this organization does.
It is a group of people who are attempting to save fragments of nature and to care for wild animals in depth, intensively, and forever.